to our candidates forum tonight. We have 5 candidates vying for 3 positions on the Muir Beach Board of Directors Community Service District. And it's good to see a lot of neighbors out here to participate in this. This event is being brought to you by the Elderberries, and this is the second candidate event they've done. Maybe there'll be more. And they basically put this together and got a bunch of questions out ahead of time. Hopefully you saw it on the internet, or you got a thing in your mailbox, or next door, or I think, and Lori Peel's account. So there's been a number of questions submitted. We are also going to have today the League of Women Voters. We have Vita Flores from League of Women Voters. And basically she is going to sort of marshal this event and make sure that it stays on time. We're going to be done by 9 o'clock, which might sound like a long way off, but there's a whole bunch of questions that have come in and a pretty strict format. For example, the candidates will have they're having exactly 3 minutes to give an introductory talk. They have 1 minute to answer questions. So 2 minutes to answer questions?
Yeah, 2 minutes to answer questions.
Oh.
1 minute closing statement.
1 minute closing statement. Okay, there we go. Which I think is great because it's good training for the CSD. Maybe those meetings will go faster. It works for me. We have 5 candidates: Linda Gross, Layton Hills, Peter Lambert, Brent Schoenfeld, and Steve Schaefer, who most of you probably know. One big applause. Let's see, maybe just a logistic thing or two. Please, if you've got a cell phone, put it on vibrate. And if you want to talk to people during this thing, I would go outside and do it so you're not disturbing. Personally, I have not the world's best hearing anymore, so I'm going to also ask the candidates here, when you're talking, keep the microphone right in front of your face here. Hopefully I'm doing it right. When you turn your head, keep it with you like an ice cream cone, okay? And that'll help a lot. Not a problem. Let's see, what am I missing? Anything? There'll be a wrap-up. I think Vita will give us a wrap-up at the end, some things about what we've done. And I think that's pretty much it go. Oh, yes, there are cards that were distributed for questions if you didn't get one online. So if you have something written out on a card, raise your hand. Marilyn or someone will come and pick it up.
Or they'll give you a card if you need it.
Or they'll give you a card if you need it. But I know how many questions there were, and so if you want to do that, you better do it fast, because we're going to run out of time, folks. So are we ready to go?
We're ready to go.
We're ready to go? Okay. Here you go, Vita.
Thank you very much. My name is Vita Flores. I'm here as your moderator today from the League of Women Voters of Marin County. I'm also here with Ann Laser, who is our timekeeper. Can everyone see her in front, all of our candidates? Okay, we're ready to go. We're going to ask questions and wrap up about 9 o'clock today. We'll have opening statements of 3 minutes. Our questions will be 2 minutes each, and our closing statements will be 1 minute. So just to confirm that. So each question will start with a different candidate. So we'll start on our right with Linda Gross. Okay? And here's the first question.
First, the opening statement.
Opening statement, of course. We'll have our opening statement from Linda, and we'll pass the microphone to you.
Hello everybody, thanks for turning out tonight. I'm Linda Gross. I've lived in Muir Beach for 15 years with my husband Matt Silva and Daniela. I'm a designer and associate professor at California College of the Arts, and I consult with companies like Levi Strauss and Patagonia on sustainability issues. I've served on the Community Service District Board for 2 years and on the Muir Beach Volunteer Fire Association for 3 years. In 2015, I ran for office because my neighbours asked me to. And as a designer who works in teams to bring ideas to life, problem solve and get stuff done on a deadline, I felt I had some skills to help Muir Beach take on some challenges that it faced. 2015 was a big year for Muir Beach. It was the first contested election in a very long time. We set a new all-time county record for voter turnout, which was 74%. And we ushered in 3 new board members. People turned out and they voted for change. So what was going on? The Sunset Way project at that time wasn't getting done. Residents felt pushed out. We didn't have the right people in place to allow community input and move the job forward. You might remember the playground project that overran its budget by $40,000. And residents were calling for more openness in accounting. The Fire Association, for example, wanted to be able to track that money raised for the department was actually being used for fire issues. So I ran on a platform, for want of a better word, for accountability, more people involved, and respectful conversation, if you remember. And I was elected in by the second highest number of votes of all 5 candidates. The new board quickly discovered that the district manager we'd inherited wasn't performing well. He had no contract, a minimal job description, no formal review process. So we developed those employment policies for the district, and we did a national search to find our current co-district managers, getting 2 for less than the price of 1 district manager in comparable communities. And we got expertise that no one single person could possibly have alone. So we're now set to manage the new firehouse, community centre upgrades, the Sunset Way project internally, saving money on hiring outside experts. We also completed 8 years of neglected audits and found that the water system was being subsidised by property taxes, drawing down more than $350,000 from the general fund. That's $250,000 that we could really use now to face the projects that we have on our plate. I'm completely committed to getting the work of the CSD done at the least cost and the highest quality, efficiently and effectively, and with community involvement. And with your support, I'll continue to move Muir Beach forward in another term. Thank you.
I'll ask before we go to the next candidate to hold our applause until the end. Thank you very much. Leighton? Leighton? Pardon me.
I think most of you know me, perhaps not all. I'm Leighton Hills. I was elected to the board twice and then served as district manager over a course of 10 years. Well, I'm back along with Steve because I think we can do some good. The first point is the very high level of chlorine in our drinking water. A couple of years ago, in response to a crack in our water well, the chlorine level was increased 3-fold. It still remains at this elevated level. Many believe that there are significant health issues with overchlorinating water, and they point to the increase in cancers in the 1900s tracking the increased use of chlorine. Here are some quotes from a handout to be distributed. The risk of developing cancer is 93% higher in people who drink chlorinated water. Can contribute to hardening of the arteries. 2/3 of our harmful exposure to chlorine is during showering due to inhalation of mist and from absorption through the skin. Why are we stuck with such a high level of chlorine? Because no one pushed back against the regulators. It's sort of like having a tax audit where the auditor tells you you owe more money. You're supposed to push back, but in the case of the CSD, we said fine. This level is not supported even by the water regulations. I've been certified in water treatment and Steve is great at negotiation. Together we can get this fixed. Next point is the water increase. It's not supported by our costs. We all got the memo from the board justifying the increase, showing the water department is operating at a loss for many years. Well, with a deeper look, those financials have our water tank lasting exactly 15 years when it was built to last 100. The short write-off period is $40,000 of expense per year instead of $6,400. The handout Steve and I corrects that and a few other things. Not surprisingly, the situation isn't so scary. Then for the budget going forward, there are all sorts of new costs being piled on. The water department tracks its costs and then its overhead, or then for overhead that's related to water, it takes a 40% share. But here's what's now to be included. $4,000 a year of repairs and maintenance, non-water. Why would we include expenses that have been identified as not being related to water? $4,000 a year tree management program. There was like one tree near the lower water tank which could be removed for $500 once. $7,000 a year in fire and liability insurance. Well, the water tanks don't carry fire insurance. The appropriate amount is $1,800. The biggest, $70,000 a year. This is the payroll cost for the second district manager who has no responsibility for water. Right now, the water department brings in about $106,000 in billings. You add all these extra costs and even a 100% increase isn't enough. Exclude them and the rate increase drops to about 20 to 25%. Bringing this into focus and keeping it there is what Steve and I can be a big help with.
Hello, I'm Peter Lambert. I think most of you know me as well. I'm a candidate for a director seat on the Muir Beach Board of Directors. I moved to Muir Beach in May of 2002. In 2011, I was appointed to the board. In 2013, I was elected to the board, and now I'm running for the current term. The CSD has responsibility for maintaining and improving the quality of life for all Muir Beach residents and homeowners. That's typically broken down by water, roads, fire and safety, and recreation, which includes our community center and the trails. We have to address issues on several fronts if we're to sustain the good quality of life we all enjoy living here. Our community has operated with an admirable spirit of keeping our costs as low as possible. In that spirit, there are things that have not been addressed, not attended to, that have left us today in a more difficult situation. Fortunately, we have two very talented and capable district co-managers already making progress on addressing these issues. Unfortunately, some of the past decisions resulted in necessary expenditures having been postponed, not only increasing the ultimate costs, but masking our true financial situation and leaving us currently unprepared and underfunded to take on our regular maintenance and repairs and replacement of our assets. In particular, our community center needs attention, as do our roads and trails, and our water system is operating at a loss, which is not only unsustainable, it is illegal. From here, we can only move forward. I believe that I can work constructively with our other board members to set proper priorities for realizable plans that will move us forward on a sustainable path at the lowest possible cost to the community. If I'm re-elected to the CSD board, I would strive to make myself as effective as possible by becoming as knowledgeable as I can about our needs and the available options for addressing them. For instance, I've been attending a seminar and a workshop put on by the Rural Community Assistance Corporation on water systems, trying to learn more about that and how to operate them effectively. I look forward to sharing the knowledge I gain with my fellow directors and working with our co-managers to make the right decisions for our community. I want to do what I can to make the quality of life in our community as good as it can be and ensure that it's sustainable and affordable for everyone. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Frank Schoenfeld. My wife and I, Barbara, have close. My wife Barbara and I have lived here in Muir Beach since 1974. We raised our son here. I have been a practicing psychiatrist in San Francisco at the VA Medical Center, where I have devoted my life in the care of veterans. But in addition to direct clinical care, I've been involved in significant program development, program planning, and managing. And I have done this over many years. This involves a lot of management skills, including the building of programs through the program development, through high levels of organization, funding, which is obtained by way of grants. I've done much grant writing. And also important is to form collaborations with often disparate but organizations and people who have maybe different objectives, but to be able to get along together to reach a common goal. So I bring that experience. Now that I'm semi-retired, I've become more directly involved in our community's volunteer efforts. I volunteered for the facilities and personnel committees, and have experienced firsthand the value that these committees can bring to the community, and how impressive it is to be able to tap into the resource of our own community members who have tremendously talented and have been able to make tremendous contributions over this past year. I'm also a member of the Elderberries and the Muir Beach Firemen's Association. I support the board's accomplishments the past 2 years, and which includes better budgeting that we can understand, resumption of the required audits, clear accounting of how our money is spent, and establishing well-defined personnel policies. We also have hired 2 excellent co-district managers and formed a new water management team. All of these have been badly needed. I have a history of taking on challenges, getting things done, and producing good results. I believe my extensive management experience in government at local, regional, and national levels, along with my volunteer services in our community, will allow me to make a positive contribution to the CSD Board of Directors.
How did you manage to stop that at exactly 3 minutes? I'm watching her, I can't believe it. First of all, thank all of you for giving up your evening and coming out here this evening. This is a great turnout, and I speak for everybody. We really appreciate you guys showing up and doing this. I'm Steve Schaefer. I think everybody knows me. But I'm here tonight asking for your vote for 3 reasons. Number 1, and most important to me, is that I was asked. I was asked by a number of community members who feel like their voices aren't being heard and that the current board isn't acting in a financially responsible way. It's not an easy job to be on this board. It requires discipline. Discipline in limiting costs and still providing the community with the services they need and want. So the second reason I'm asking for your vote is to help the board control these costs. And it's also the third reason for me being here tonight, because for those of you that are here and subsequently the rest of the community, a better understanding of why the proposed 100% water rate increase is unnecessary and some new perspectives are needed on this board. Please look at the handouts that we're going to put out here. I think Leslie's got some now. That graphically show how the current board arrived at the decision to double the rates. I'll be brief because Mr. Smarty Pants Layton over there already did an excellent job of pointing out most of the ghost expenses which shouldn't have been in the proposal to start with. Remember the $4,000 for water repairs, not water, and the $4,000 for tree expenses, the $4,000 for website, fire insurance on a cement tank. These are things that shouldn't have been in that proposal. But wait, there's one more. There's an expense of $350,000 to $400,000 to replace the lower tank in 4 to 5 years. Some of you may remember that when the upper tank got a little sketchy, we installed a Hypalon bladder that remained serviceable for 20 years until we replaced the upper tank with the cement tank that's there now. So the real life of the lower tank, when you figure in a bladder later, is probably about 25 years. So using that $350,000 to $400,000 to justify this water rate increase doesn't really make any sense. So we don't need a 100% water rate increase. Let's use accurate cost accounting and set the rates in a more responsible way that reflects the true cost of providing clean water to this community. And cut cost. Should each household be paying almost $1,000 a year for a general manager? I don't think so. And finally, and I mean this board made it a policy to not let the audience speak before they've discussed an issue amongst themselves. Is that fair or even smart? In the old board, we let the audience speak first so that we could maybe learn something from them before we started talking about what our positions are. It sounds to me like that's way more fair and way more respectful for the rest of you. So thank you very much.
Thank you, candidates, for your opening statements. I would remind you that we are filming this for the Community Media Center of Marin and for our general public, so please be mindful of the cameras. Do not step in front. I will also invite you to put away the candidate information that has just been passed out until after the event. I want to make sure that this is fair and equal for all of the candidates here. So you are welcome to... We'll go ahead and start with our questions. And we have many questions this evening, and our first two are about process. So if you don't mind indulging me, I will ask you just to have the first two questions at 1 minute apiece. Would that be okay with our hosts? Okay, wonderful. Let me put on my glasses, read the question. Our question will begin with Layton Hills, and then we'll go to Peter Lambert, Frank Schoenfeld, Steve Schaefer, and then back to the beginning with Linda Gross. In the last election, there was emphasis on engagement, transparency, and unity to bring a more civil tone to the board meetings. How can this be addressed and improved in the future? You have 1 minute to answer the question.
Great. Well, Steve and I have actually talked about this before because his comments about the audience having a chance to participate before the board makes up its minds, I think is the best way to get the viewpoints of the community into the decision making. So I know that I've sat in a board meeting with a position on a particular topic, waited until the board had discussed it thoroughly, and even Steve Wynn had chimed in on. And then when it came time for the audience, it was sort of like, oh, gee, if we had known that, we might have had a different sort of opinion. So you end up having to sort of undo some things.
Well, I don't disagree that we need to get more community comment on issues before we move too far forward on the board. I think that's a good point. I do think, though, that there have been some positive aspects that have brought the community into greater participation in making decisions for the community and assisting the board in doing research on different issues and so on, and that's been a real value to the board in saving their time and to the community, not only in getting more information to the board and to the decision makers, but also in getting more people hands-on involved in the decisions we're working on. And that's something I'd like to see continue.
Thank you.
I agree that it is important to have community input. I think that's one of the important values that I have that I share with the current board. I find that the current meetings are very full and contain a lot of information and requires some action. I share Peter's observation about the value of getting input from the community by community members actually working together to provide input to the board and recommendations. A much more powerful way of achieving that. And from what I understand, there are currently about 50 people involved in committee work that is associated with the board. And that's, to me, a tremendous improvement in how the board and the community relate to each other.
Thank you. Well, I'm thrilled that everybody seems to like the idea that I said in my opening statement about maybe we need more audience participation by letting the audience speak first, which certainly makes more sense to me. I feel like that the current board is maybe being a little bit misrepresented in that I've been to several meetings and I have not seen this engagement that I'm hearing most of you talk about. It seems to me like that most often the audience gets cut off because there isn't time to hear what they have to say after the board's already had their discussion. So I think what we need is more community participation. I don't think it's all going to come from people who come to the meetings. You just have to get the word out. And maybe a big help would be to get the website working properly where there's more information on that so that people do have more information about what we're doing. That's it.
Thank you.
Hi. So I ran on having more community input, and this is a subject that's really near and dear to my heart. And I can say that I have found that the new board meetings, the structure of the new board meetings is much improved, and it actually follows the standard guidelines that are recommended by the state and the county. Those board meetings are intended for the board to come together and deliberate on particular issues, because we can't meet outside of those board meetings because we would violate the Brown Act. But we also had, for example, the Water Education Day, where people actually gave input directly, and that went straight up to the board. There aren't that many people that come to the meetings, so doing the community outreach, which I'm a big fan of, and having the committees, that's where many, many more people are involved, more than 50 members of the community involved in committees, and many more. When I go door to door, when I listen, when 65 plus people come to a Water Education Day, there are many ways to get people involved besides those meetings.
Next question for 1 minute each, starting with Peter. During a deliberation process over the resolution of various community issues, which takes preference, process or outcome?
Outcome. That's obvious. Yeah, that's what we're here for, is to make decisions with the right outcome. Process gets in the way sometimes. You know, there's a lot of back and forth and so on, but I think that's by far the precedent.
Anything to add?
No, thank you.
It's not required to use all the time.
Well, I think process contributes to the outcomes that we get. By process, if it's meant that having some give and take and discussion and sharing of views around a decision that needs to be made, especially very important decisions, then it has a significant effect on the outcome. So we want to make informed decisions, and we want to have as much of the community input as possible, and that involves a process that encourages that kind of activity.
Well, I think that process and outcome are natural enemies, but both necessary. Obviously, the answer to this question is outcome. We can drag it out a little bit and use our minute up, but the fact is, the process is a necessary step in getting the outcome, and we do the best we can. Everybody tries hard on this board; they always have, to do the right thing and participate in the process that makes it legal to come to the outcomes that we need. But basically, the answer to this question is the big deal is outcome.
I would agree with the people on this panel here that outcome is clearly the most important, but as a designer, I have to say process is really important. And I see it as a funnel where people get more involved at the beginning, and the further along, and their concerns are part of what is considered right from the beginning. And as you get further down the line to the outcome, there's less and less process and more delivery. And it's a standard design process. And I would say lack of process or being blind to process can derail a project, and that's what happened with the Sunset Way project 2 years ago.
Process. Actually, expedient process. For the 16 years that I was going to board meetings, for the years that Steve was chair or other chairs, we had a policy that we never kept anybody from speaking. We'd let them go the length that they wanted, and then at the end, people felt like they had been heard, and we could move on to the next topic, make a decision, and go from there. So I think the process is important, that everybody feels like they have a chance to be heard, and that the meeting not get cut off, or not have limited time for everybody to talk because you got so many things on the agenda that you have to wrap up the meeting by a predetermined time.
Excellent. Thank you very much, candidates, for the 1-minute question. Our 2-minute questions will now begin with Frank Schoenfeld. Okay. How do you feel about encroachments on CSD land, and in particular the easement to Little Beach, that has become so restrictive that not even the smallest of boats can be launched easily? If elected, what will you do to maintain our current land and the right-of-way to the sea?
Well, I'd answer, that's just asking for a very specific easement, which is, of course, a vital one because it's right there to Little Beach, which is one of the main accesses for us as a community to get to Little Beach. We do have a easements committee. Mr. McKenzie is heading that up. And so the issue with easements is not just that, but all of the easements in the community. And I've heard different opinions about how easements should be handled. Some people want them more restricted, others want them more open. So it's not an easy question to answer for the community, because I think we need more of a consensus on each easement as to how it should be handled. But as far as Little Beach is concerned, if that is an easement, and if it is encroached upon by the owners of property that are adjacent to that easement, then that would be a problem, because that particular area is so vital to our access to Little Beach.
Well, I kind of like to think of it, there's easements and there's easements, because we do have easements in the community that have been ignored for a lot of good reasons. There's an easement that runs behind Brent and Julie's, and Dave's very familiar with this. But in the past, when the board made an effort to open this up, and the Park Service opposed this dramatically, they said that they did not want an easement that opened a thoroughfare up to the overlook. But for whatever reason, at one point, this easement got opened up to the public and was made much more available than it had been in the past. They have to be left open to the public. You can't put a fence up and close them. Les Smith tried that at the bottom of Cove Lane, and actually I think there was a legal action to have him remove the blockade that he put up. So in any case, going back to the other easement that I was talking about, is then there were a number of break-ins, and there were problems with people who shouldn't have been there, who were using the easement for all the wrong reasons. So we took the option of keeping it open and having a sign so that the community knew how to get there and use it, but we didn't encourage people from over the hill to use that easement because they abused it. As to the Cove Lane, it's a difficult situation because all of that's private property down there. There's certainly an easement along the beach, which I don't know if anybody's ever encroached on as far as the Gronemans or all the people that own that property along the top. I don't think that's ever been a problem. A big problem has been the Cove Lane itself, where it goes to the beach, and where the people used to keep their boats until they had to move them because they were on private property. So there's really not a lot of change that's going to happen that I think it will happen with the easements, and nor do I think is really needed.
In general, with the easements, my particular stance on them is that they're there and should remain there. Having said that, what I've heard from the community is, well, we know actually that the conditions outside of the community, we're all feeling encroached upon by increased numbers of people coming into the area. And if that means that we need to revisit an easement so that people feel more protected and they're not as inundated with strangers as they feel, then I think we should visit that as a community, and that we should come to some conclusions as a community, that in easement by easement if necessary. Specific to that one on Cove Lane, I'd like to understand more about where the property lines begin and end, and I'd like to see the parties involved come together on some sort of mediated outcome that suits everybody. And we've got the skills in the community to facilitate that.
I think what Steve Schaefer says is correct, that the easement at the base of Cove was blocked off by Les Smith, who lived at the base of Cove, built a retaining wall, and then Bob Winkleman, as we all know, wanted to launch his boat and was very upset about it and took it to the California Coastal Commission. The Coastal Commission ended up granting an easement across that property, or a requirement for an easement. So that's one specific that is not in the hands of the community. It's actually been taken care of by the Coastal Commission. For the other easements in the community, I feel very much that they should remain open. I think that they go right next to people's homes, including mine or Shirley's or people like that. And I think that they can become a burden if you advertise them too much. I know once upon a time there was a plan to put names on them to honor some of the locals, and we decided to do that just by resolution instead of posting it on a board. So I think that we can be sensitive to it, recognizing that it's a resource for ourselves, and we don't want to squander it by letting adjacent property owners just take them over.
I think in general that the easement issues probably need to be dealt with on a easement by easement basis, depending on where they are and how close they are to people's houses and so on. But I think several people have brought up an important overriding issue, and that's protecting the community from too many people from outside the community coming in and basically making people uncomfortable, maybe by their proximity, taking advantage, parking, all those sort of things that are a real burden on our community. And on a day-to-day basis, like, well, just this last week, obviously with the hot weather, we saw tremendous amounts of people parking in what we consider to be residence spaces. And this is something I think we need to solve among ourselves within the community. I think it's important that the easements exist. The Cove Lane one is a bit of a difficulty because it's so close to the adjacent properties. But I'd like to believe that we can, between the property owners and the other people involved, that a good solution can be worked out without it being, a difficult situation. But I think first of all, or most of all, we have to protect the community. And, it's been like this for years and years and years. And at least in the 15 years I've been here, it hasn't generally been an issue or a problem. And I think we could return to that.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank the community for sending their questions in. We had a stack of questions that we really had to look through carefully. And the next question states, I believe the most important issue in the upcoming Muir Beach election involves the financial strain on a very small community in dealing with increased expenses of multiple infrastructure needs. Since obtaining grants or free money from somewhere else is highly unlikely, what do you think is the best way to get the money for this infrastructure work? And we'll begin with Steve Schaefer.
I'd rather not been first on this one. Well, I think that, I'm trying to think of a good way to put all this together. As was said in the question, we're not going to get money from someplace else. When I started with this CSD board 29 years ago, we had $33 in the bank. I was with Leva Wine, Franconi, a bunch of people you all love and remember. They were really great people. But we had $33. And then I left this last board with $1 million, just right at $1 million. So we can raise the money with adequate financial overlook and not having a lot of extra expense. Like, I'm a firm believer that the idea of having 2 general managers for $100 and some thousand is just not something that should work for a community of 150 houses. That's almost $1,000 a house per year is what you're paying for district managers. Layton did it for $55,000 after he'd done it for a number of years for $24,000. Maury Ostroff did it for, I think, $24,000. And he said that most of the time he did it while he was watching television. So I think, you know, I think there's better ways to handle the money we have and increase our overall picture by just being more frugal with our money and not spending so much of it. It's going to take some more volunteer work. The board that comes in is going to need to step up to the plate and do some of this work themselves. You can't give it all to committees that are going to then ask the general manager for help, which is going to cause an overload on the general managers, and you're going to end up needing 2 of them. And that's not the way this should be run. We're a small community, and we shouldn't be there. Stop. Oh, I thought...
In terms of, it's true that we're a wealthy community and we're a largely white community, and there's not a lot of money out there for us to get hold of. But there is some. So, for example, we've just adopted federal procurement policies that make us available to receive federal grant monies, including FEMA money that we just received recently for road repairs and pipe repairs. But I do have to pick up on this general manager thing, because I actually need to unpack that $1,000 per household number. I think it's probably more like 800, and I want to know if it's if that is for 2 or for 1, and of course we were paying for 1 before, and then I'd prefer to see a per capita number. And I think you'll get down to something like $100 per capita, which I think is a real bargain to make sure that our coffers are not depleted, and to make sure that $350,000 that we should have available to us right now on the big projects that we are facing is not moved over because the water system or that side of the business has not been handled well. That's what happens when you don't have professional people in place. And $55,000, we all know, was way under market, and we thank everybody, including Leighton, for his time. But the management of this district should be able to be done well. We should deliver the services. We should be able to do that fiscally responsibly and not on anybody's charity. Not on anybody's charity at all. If someone wants to give us $55,000 for a new firehouse or make a donation, great. We'll take someone's philanthropy, but not to be dependent on someone being underpaid in comparison to what the local norm is.
Most communities borrow money, then they spend it, pay interest, maybe double the amount that they borrowed in terms of the interest over the 30 years. The thing that's unique about Muir Beach is that we always raise the money first. So once upon a time, we had a representative from the California Rural Water Association show up for a tour, and she was asking us about our eligibility for grants and how we borrowed money and stuff. And I said, oh, we pay for projects ahead of time. We just paid for this $600,000 water tank. She was shocked to hear that. And we don't have any interest costs on that basis. So to me, that's terrific. And at the conclusion of that meeting, she said that this was the best small water system that she had ever seen. So I think we've done a pretty good job.
The initial assumption that we can't get grant or other types of money is, I'm not sure that's true. I think we should continue to try. We can't depend on it for certain. That aside, I do think we should continue in our past method of paying for all the improvements ourselves beforehand, not borrowing money. I'd hate to see us have to do that. But having said that, things are more and more and more expensive, and our ability to raise money and put it away for these projects isn't getting any better. So we have to, look at all options. But personally, I would rather not. And I think that there are a lot of things that we're talking about doing, all of which need doing, but not all of which need doing immediately. And I think we need to really carefully evaluate what has to be done and how we can, and what can be put off, what we can do, what partial measures we can take to keep things going, like the patching of the road on Sunset Way we did recently, which to my standards brings it back to very good shape. It doesn't solve the drainage issues. Obviously, it doesn't solve the water pipeline issues, but it will allow us to proceed without spending money on that for another couple of years, I would think. And I think that's what we need to do. We are a small community, and we need to live within our means.
From my reading of it, we're faced with a significant outflow of expenditures on projects that are being proposed, some of which are clearly needed, like the upgrading of the water line down on Sunset, which is said to have exceeded its normal life expectancy. So that in itself is a significant amount of money, plus, of course, the road project on top of it. I would say that even with the frugality and the saving of money that we have in our accounts, our financial situation is going to be significantly stretched if we want to move ahead with the projects like the Sunset project. We have projects that we have to do with the community center that are absolutely necessary, like seismic upgrading and doing repairs that will just keep the community center from further deteriorating. And, of course, also on the horizon is the building of a firehouse. Now, there are monies set aside by the Fire Association, but that's not nearly enough to cover what we would project would be the cost of a firehouse. So there will need to be ways in which to either finance money or raise money. I agree with Peter that I wouldn't give up on the idea of grants. We have a lot of talented people in this community who have made a life of grant writing, and that we need to be out there looking for ways in which we can fit the grants to shape the nature of our community to be able to meet the request for proposals. So we certainly want to give that a significant try, because we are going to be faced with a real stress on our finances.
Okay, thank you, candidates. Now we're back at the top of the batting order, and we'll start again with Linda Gross. Okay. What is your opinion on the use of unelected subcommittees in dealing with Muir Beach issues? Do you think the use of unelected subcommittees should continue?
Unelected subcommittees, meaning the committees and the ad hoc committees that we have. Absolutely. They're actually recommended by the state and by the county for small districts like ours. And if you remember, if you were here when Supervisor Verdoni came, he also said that small communities who were very effective actually use committees to get a lot of work done. Just to clarify some things, it's true that residents, general residents in our community are not elected. There are 5 elected members to the CSD board. And the committees are responsible to that board. So they go off at the direction of the board. There's typically a board member or even 2 that are part of that committee. They do research, deep research, often hours, days of work that lifts the burden off the board and off the district manager. And then they come back and report in on recommendations to the board. And then the board is the one that has the authority to take those recommendations to inform policy that they pass. It's like the difference between wading through thigh-high snow and gliding along on a pair of cross-country skis. You're basically doing the same work, but much more effectively and much more efficiently.
I think committees are great from the standpoint of accessing the talent that exists within the community. The problem with many committees is that they are staffed by the people who have the axes to grind. That I can remember years ago having a tree committee. We had Hester on the committee and we had Fred Tall, a guy who had never seen a tree he wouldn't like to prefer to see as a stack of firewood. They never got anything done. So I think committees have to be assessed periodically for their effectiveness. I think some committees have been terribly effective, and I think other ones haven't been. They're ad hoc committees. They're supposed to be of a limited time frame, and I think that when they're assessed for their productiveness, they should then be either continued or wrapped up. And I think that the most important thing is that the board, at the conclusion of a committee, actually make its own decision. Lots of times people on the board, and I've seen it myself, end up saying, well, this has already been decided by the committee, so who are we to, change that decision? But I think it's important. They're the elected people. They're the people who don't have access to grind. And so I think it's something where relying on the elected officials is still terribly important, recognizing that there's a lot of talent out there to be tapped into.
Well, I'm a big fan of unelected committees, as we're calling them now. I started out, as those of you that come to the board meetings probably know, as a unelected committee skeptic. I didn't really like the idea. I didn't see the need for it, but I've seen their effectiveness, and I've seen it draw in the talents and skills and intelligence of this amazing community and get people involved, and I think that's really a great thing. I think we've all benefited from it. It's true what Leighton says, you get people to some degree that have not necessarily an axe to grind, but an interest in something. There was the Trails Committee, various other things where people just want to help out. They find something that's important to them, and they want to contribute to the community, and they're a very good way for that to happen. The board benefits by the increased knowledge that's imparted to the board from the committees. Our district managers definitely benefit because it saves them time from having to do some of the tasks that the committee members are doing. So I think they're a positive, and I'd like to see continued and more use of them.
Having been on two committees, I have firsthand experience as to how they can function, and being on the Personnel and the Facilities Committee. And both committees functioned very well and resulted in providing valuable information to the board that would have been hard for the board to have gathered by themselves, or at least would have taken a significant amount of effort to do the research that was done on the committees, particularly the Personnel Committee. So the committees can clearly serve an excellent function in the community. I would also say that I would agree that we shouldn't seem that all committees are good. I've been on lots of committees in government work at all levels of government, and I've seen how well they can function and where they end up just being a stalling factor in making a decision. To me, what works is you certainly need excellent leadership on a committee so that the committee keeps focused on what the task is rather than getting off track. And you also need committee members who are dedicated to being having an objective way of looking at the issue and not being an opportunity to lobby for a certain self-interest. So committees, I think, can be very valuable. They have to be looked at carefully as to how effectively they're functioning. And as with the Personnel Committee, once they've done their job, I agree, they should be discontinued.
First of all, I have a little problem with unelected committees. Is that what we call them? I mean, I think they should be called undocumented. Not really. All right. Committees serve a purpose. One of the things I think that is not a great idea is to have 2 board members on a committee. And this board has done that several times, and I think we did it in the past as well, and we agreed it was unsuccessful. Because if you have 2 board members on a committee, you don't need anybody else. There's no chance that anybody's going to go against what the 2 board members are going to vote for, because they're the 2 board members. When they get on the board, they're going to probably bring their point to the board more forcefully than the other committee members. So I think 1 board member on a committee is a necessity. I don't feel like we should have so many committees as we do. I think that's a mistake. I think that you can have them and they are effective. I agree with Frank, sometimes they can stall things rather than help things. But one of the issues with having so many committees is we have to pay for them, in that they're gonna need information from the general manager, and it takes general managers time to get back and give those committees the information they need. The board is a little more qualified to act without so many questions to the general manager, usually. That's why you elect a board. You elect the people you think are going to be able to effectively govern, and not the committee. But I do think there's a need for them in some instances. We used a personnel committee when we hired the general manager. We've done it in the past a number of times. Matter of fact, we hired a lot of general managers using a personnel committee. So they have a place. They should be abandoned when they're not useful anymore. And that's that.
Although I would like to say something else.
Okay. All right, now that I've got your attention, let's keep our energy high. So we had 6 people ask this next question in one way or another, and we'll start with Leighton.
Wait, you need to ask it. Please ask the question.
Well, I'm going to give you the, oh, more caffeine, please. Okay. Do you have reservations about whether the proposed water increase rate is justified? Why are we raising water rates if we are being assessed $150 twice a year?
Well, I commented on that more than anybody else in my opening statement. I think that a water rate increase is needed. When I stopped being district manager, in my last budget, I said we'll very likely need to increase the water rates next year. That was 2 years ago. We're just getting around to it. The rates don't need to be increased by 100%. That's like off the charts high. And I think that when you have a chance to go through my handout, you'll see that there's some miscalculations in the existing numbers. So I think that the rate increase could be down around 20 to 25%, and I think that that's going to be more than enough for us to be solidly in the black.
I think water rate increases have to be very carefully calculated. There are guidelines and rules, laws about what must be included in the base, both for the fixed costs as well as variable costs, and that needs to be done very carefully and adhered to strictly. And in the past, I don't believe that was done. So when we talk about 100% increase, it's 100% on a number that wasn't necessarily a meaningful number. So we don't, I mean, it was what we were charging, but whether it was really based on a proper calculation of the cost, it's not clear if that's true or not. In any event, that must be done, and the rates should be based on the true costs, including the cost of replacement and building up a sinking fund for future expenditures. Having said that, I think that the work done to establish the costs for the water system have been done with the best of intentions, very carefully. We appreciate that other members of the community are interested in, looking at it and making sure, but I think we do need a water rate increase. And from what I've seen, I believe that the $25 a month increase is appropriate.
The first, to answer the question about the ordinance where we end up paying $150 twice a year for water, that goes into capital improvement. So that doesn't, those funds are not to be used for maintenance and delivery of services. And so the calculation on that, as far as what the water rate should be, that needs to be taken into consideration. From my looking at the audits that have been conducted over the last 8 years, the ones that have been made up because they hadn't been conducted since 2008 prior, that there has been a consistent undervaluing of the water revenues. That has been, less revenues have been provided than for the expenses of the system. And if we had had water rates that were equivalent to what the expenses were for delivering the services, plus maintenance, plus having an offset, an additional offset for capital improvement, we wouldn't be faced with the concept of 100% increase in rate. It would have been a gradual increase like all other communities are supposed to do, and we haven't done that. The result, from if my reading of the audits are correct, is that we have lost $350,000 in revenue. If we had that additional revenue in our accounts, that would help a lot towards the projects we're considering undertaking.
I'm not sure I understand how the extra money in the water that we would have collected in water rates would help us do the other projects, because it can only be used, the water taken in for water can only be used for water. So we wouldn't have $350,000 that we could spend on other projects, because you can't spend that money on other projects. Understand, water rates are based on the cost of water delivery. I don't think that people necessarily made up numbers to justify this 100% water increase. But I can look at the numbers, and you can look at the numbers in the proposed budget, and you can see that they depreciated the 100-year water tank over 15 years. That's $40,000 a year you're saying you need that you don't need. It's a 100-year tank. It's $6,400 a year. Why add numbers to support something that you don't need? We need a water rate increase, no question. Do we need 100%? Absolutely not. I think Leighton's right with probably 20, 25%. I'd like to see it less than that, but when I start pulling the numbers out of the budget, like supplies not related to water, like but $4,000 tree allowance. I mean, there's a lot of ways you can put these numbers in and say, boy, this justifies really raising the heck out of the water rates. But is that what you want as a community? I mean, I don't think that's I think what we should do is have responsible costs that reflect what the water rates need to be to come out a little ahead. We were in the black for a number of years, and you'll see it on the handout when it comes out. It's just a matter of how you do the accounting to make it look like you might need something that you don't. And I think we can be perfectly happy with a solid 20% maybe water increase, and we'll be in the black. We'll do well. But this 100% is not going to happen, I don't think. I think it's a bad plan.
Hi. So the reason that we have a 100% water rate raise now is because we haven't had any water rate raise for the last 7 years. So it's all coming at once. And the fact that it is 100% over what it was before is somewhat arbitrary, because it's based on calculations that were done in good faith and provided to the community for you to look at and to comment back. We are now in that comment period. In fact, we extended the 45-day comment period and we added another one to gain more input from the community. So the board has actually not voted on this yet. They voted to put this water rate proposal out to the community and invite your comments back. So the fact that we're even having this discussion here tonight is a sign of how open this board is to community input. I'd also say that it's not easy for me, being on the current board in an election year, talking about this water rate increase. I have to say it would be political suicide for anyone who was, a real politician. And it shows how this board is really committed to taking on the issues and dealing with them. The fact is that our water pipes aged out in 2016. You can read that in the 20-year plan that's up on the website. And we don't have enough money to pay for that. And in fact, we were in the hole for $350,000, and that's why money was moved away from the general fund. And actually, to correct what Steve just said, that $350 that was taken, $350,000 that was taken for the general fund could have been used on all kinds of things besides water. It was in the general fund. So we need to run our water. We're legally required to run a solvent water system. And not only that, it's one of the conditions of our water rights. This is really important stuff.
This election is for a 5-year term. Where do you see the community at the end of 5 years? And how do you propose getting there? So what are your goals for the next term? And how do you propose getting there?
That's you.
And we'll begin with Peter.
Well, I hope 5 years from now the community looks very much like it looks today. Like to see Sunset Way paved a little better. Some of the projects we've talked about taking care of, and but I don't personally want to see much change. I like our community the way it is. I think that among us we can work out the things we disagree on and find good solutions for the entire community. We're all neighbors, we live together here, and we have to make it work. And there's a lot of talent and intelligence in the community, and I'm certain that we can. So I think the next board, whoever that is, will do their best to work towards the goals that we all share. And hopefully in 5 years from now, we'll see a lot of those realized. And we'll come back and do this again.
Thank you.
Well, having lived at Muir Beach since 1974, I am an advocate of maintaining the quality of life that we've enjoyed over all of this time. I do think that we need to do things to make sure that this quality of life is sustained. We do need to have good roads that are functional and that we can live with. I know it's very difficult on Sunset Way, trying to make your way in and out of there with the way the road is at this point. Also, we need a firehouse. Our current firehouse is in an area where it would be vulnerable if there was a disaster like a tsunami. So we have a location up on top near the overlook, and we need that firehouse. So I'd like to see that, certainly within this period of time. I'd like to see this community center maintain its current quality, but also to be structurally sound. It's going to be designated as a disaster center. We're going to put in a generator so that in the case of a disaster, it will be useful for that purpose. And it needs a seismic upgrade in order to be functioning like that. So there are many other issues that face the community that go beyond the board of directors' domain of responsibilities that can affect the quality of life. People have talked about the pressure of the outside world, which has found us for sure, and how do we govern that in a way that we can feel like we're welcoming and yet not yet overrun. And there are a lot of forces at play that we have to be smart about in taking advantage of our abilities to do that.
Well, much like all of you, I love this community. I love the way it is right now. I don't want to see much change. 5 years from now, I'd be absolutely thrilled if we were all still sitting here. I would really appreciate it if there was something we could do about the fact that we're this paradise little island, and as the bigger everything gets around us, the more of a problem we're going to have. We're going to have issues with Highway 1. But most of that they aren't things that we can do anything about. What we can do things about is how we work together. How do we relate to each other? Do we keep this a community that's really, really a bunch of people that love each other and show up at community events, and we have a quilters, and we have all these wonderful things that no other community has. We have our own fire department. I mean, this is a pretty spectacular place. So if we could keep it this way, I'm absolutely thrilled. But I wouldn't like to see us get into things where somebody keeps correcting me about my numbers. Because that $350,000 is really an arguable number based on the numbers you used to get there. And I just think if you see the handout we're going to put out, you'll feel more like maybe that's not the real number. But anyway, you corrected me. I'm trying to be civil. No, I'm really easy. I'm good at that. Anyway, answer to this question. We got unbelievable pressures coming that are going to be a lot worse than what we're seeing now. Climate's changing. There's a lot of things changing. But we can still love each other and treat each other with respect and keep this the best community that we could ever possibly hope to live in. And you guys are the ones that make it that way. Thank you.
Okay, we're playing ping pong here, but I just want to say those are not my numbers. Those are the auditor's numbers. And just look at the audits. They're available now publicly for the first time for 8 years. You're welcome to look at them. Where we're going to be in 5 years, it's actually not, and that's a near future, so I'm not sure there's going to be a tremendous amount of change. But in terms of a firehouse, for example, on the VFA last night, it's clear, I think, that the barbecue is, there's no way that the barbecue is going to be a fundraiser enough for a firehouse. And I think we'll see that the barbecue, it becomes more of a party and a fundraiser rather than a fundraiser. And we have new people in place that have got great grant writing skills. They do it professionally. And that committee in particular is really that board is gearing up to do that kind of work. And there was also talk of a capital campaign. So we're getting some new blood in with some really great skills that are going to be deployed. And I think along those lines too, what I'd like to see in the next 5 years, is more of this next generation of Muir Beachers becoming involved. And in order to do that, what we need is systems in place that can be handed off easily. And that's why I was really proud of the work that we did on the Personnel Committee, because instead of someone coming in and just not able to function at all to get work done, there's now policies in place that anybody can step in and it's just going to be smooth sailing. And the same thing is happening on the Fire Association, and we just need to look at where we can do that everywhere across the district. How can we get policies in place that the next generation can come in and just contribute or continue volunteering, just like the rest of us have done, or the old timers have done for so long.
In one of my former jobs as an investment analyst, we were taught to look at a company to see, is time a stressor on this company or is time a friend? And for the Muir Beach CSD, time is your friend. Every year that we go forward, we have $50,000 new money that comes into the capital improvement fee. We have $30,000 new money that comes into the fire tax. We get about $170,000 worth of property taxes back from the county each year. We pay in something like $1 million, but aside from that. So I think that In 5 years, we will have raised and spent a good sum of money, just as we have in the past 5 years. When I started this job, our water controls were a swimming pool timer, and next to it was a pair of pliers with an old knurled nut that had been all worn down. Nina knows about it. And today it's all automated. We have real-time monitoring of our chlorine levels and everything else. I think we've made a lot of progress in the past. I think we'll continue to do it. And I think the future looks good. 5 years, we'll look back and think we did a pretty good job.
Thank you. Our next question will begin with Frank. Okay. Do you agree with the current board's decision on hiring 2 part-time general managers at the rate of $55,000 annually? Or in your opinion, does the workload only require 1 general manager at $55,000 per year?
Well, just to start, yes, I do agree with the hiring of our 2 excellent co-district managers. This was not arrived at easily. There's a period of 1 year where we had a district manager who was hired and on the understanding that he would be working on a half-time basis. But it became quite clear that this was not working for him or the community. There was just too much for him to do. And a lot of it had to do with making up with straightening out some of our budgeting issues and, of course, the audit issue. And with just trying to get things started with all of the projects that we had. So by the time we got to the point of considering a full-time district manager position, we had the experience of a year knowing that this is what was going to be needed. It wasn't a casual decision made on the basis of just some kind of projection. Also, our current district managers bring together an exceptional set of skills that are complementary to each other and also overlap, providing backup for each other. And one of our district managers, Mr. DeGroot, has enormous experience managing facilities and in contracting. And I think his abilities will help us save money as we go through the phases of trying to get these projects that we need to do going. So I think it's an investment that is very well worthwhile.
I love this idea. Not really. I don't, as I've been very vocal about so far, I do not think we need 2 general managers at all. And to go back to Linda, you were right about the $800. So, I mean, when I said almost 1,000, but you were correct. It was $800. $800 per household for a general manager is just, to me, insane. I think it's I love this theory that you can hire somebody and pay them $55,000, $60,000 a year, and that they're smart managers and they know how to do contracts. But if you don't have the money to do the projects, shouldn't you have hired them after you had the projects in place, or you had at least some schedule where you knew when you were going to spend that money? Because right now, we don't have a lot of money to do some of these projects that are going to be expertly managed. And I don't have any doubt at all that the other water manager that was hired is a terrific guy and a great person and a solid, good financial guy. But I don't think we need 2 managers. I don't think we ever needed 2 managers. It may be more than a part-time job, or maybe more than a 20-hour job. Maybe it's 30. I don't know what the current numbers are, because I don't know how much extra work the board has put onto these managers. But I'm absolutely convinced that we can, as we have for years and years and years, do very well with one manager. So I do not think it's a great idea. No, thanks.
I'm going to repeat myself a little bit, and I'm maybe going to say this 2 times. We got 2 general managers for less than the price of 1 in comparable districts. We got 2 general managers for less than the price of 1 in comparable communities close to ours. The norm is a little bit more for 1 district manager, and we've got 2 of them. And we've got skills in those 2 people that you couldn't possibly find in just 1 person. So what we're talking about is bringing up the district to norms. $55,000 for a manager before, we know was under market. And again, we thank people for their service, but we shouldn't be dependent upon someone's charity. We need to run the district professionally. These 2 are professionals. They're covering everything from water and finance issues, all the way to actually getting the stuff done. Just in a conversation today with Mike on the road, something like $200,000 that he's already saved just with the tacit knowledge of not having the breakup of the road carted away, but having it ground up to be part of the filler under the road. I mean, these are people, I mean, for 30 years he's been working on this kind of a project. We've got real professionals here. This project is not going to get stalled. It's going ahead, and it's going ahead really well and really professionally. And then talk about the other projects and the managing of the water or the filing for grants or whatever it might be. Getting those pipes that aged out in 2016 done. These are professionals. We've got $2 million houses now. This is a different kind of a community, and we need to be professional at this level so that we can have fun culturally and at our barbecue and in funky ways. But this can't be funky stuff.
I did the job for 9 years. Maury did it for 1 or 2 years. It never took us full-time. So I don't know what the contract requirement is right now for the district managers, if they're required to work full-time or part-time or just what, but I think collectively it doesn't take more than 40 hours a week. I think it's probably significantly less than that. That said, I think that we probably have some great skills. I know I've worked with Mary closely, and I think she's terrific. I've known her from her days up in Marshall as well. She's done a great job up there. I think I'll take this moment just to comment briefly on the audits. When I was district manager, we were the first board who had gotten 3 audits done in more than 10 years. It was very expensive, and it was like $18,000 a year. And so we set about streamlining our procedures and scanning everything and preparing for the next one. And we ended up getting a proposal from a company to do the remaining years, which was like 7 years, for a total cost of $10,000. They were set to go, and it was tax time, and they said, well, we can't do it right now. And then that's when I stopped being district manager. We gave that information to Bill Hansel, and he chose another auditor that ended up costing a lot more. So don't think that the project was neglected. I think we laid a lot of the groundwork for the current audit. I do think that the current audit has not been looked at critically. I think that they didn't look at what the depreciation schedule was given to the auditors. They used a depreciation schedule as if the new water tank was a steel tank, not a concrete tank. That throws off all the numbers in the audit. There are other categories that are way out of line. Anyway.
Excuse me. Yeah, I support hiring the 2 co-district managers that we have now. I think that the job has grown a lot. That, in addition to facing a firehouse, a big road project, a big water project, and all the rest, requires the set of skills that we've been lucky enough to gain for our community here. I think that, to parrot what Linda said, we're paying, at best, a fair price for these two people relative to the averages across the state for communities like ours. And we're getting more than a full share of skills for that money. And I think we should consider ourselves very lucky to be in that position. I think that the job, with all due respect, Leighton, that the job has grown quite a bit since you had the job, and that we need more time and more skills in a broader area than we used to have. And I think we have them now with these two co-managers we have. So yes, I don't remember exactly what the question is, but I'm fully in support of having the two managers now.
This is an excellent community, and with 5 candidates, it's easy to forget the question. I've done it myself. Okay. The next question is for Steve. The population of the community is aging. Would you be willing to support financially various programs for this senior population?
I gotta say, at 75 years old, I'm probably have a conflict of interest. I don't know exactly what kind of programs we could put in place for the aged, as I hate to be called. But I do know that Harvey is really, really interested in having some kind of a building where we could go to, and the old guys and women could have lunch and stuff. I don't know. I don't think so, though. To be honest, I don't think there's a lot we can do. I would hope, and this is contrary to a lot of the way I feel right now, but I think for the future I have to look at this. I think we have an issue that eventually we may have trouble getting people to be on the fire department. We're getting to be a very expensive community, and just $2 million for a house, you're not going to find a lot of people who want to volunteer to be on a fire department. So maybe one of the things we're going to need to look at sometime is hiring a couple of EMTs in a truck to live out here. And maybe that's a thing for the people that are getting older that makes a lot of sense. A couple of qualified people, a couple of really good EMTs, guys would have a semi-ambulance, and if we need them, we can get them, because they could staff it. You could have maybe 3 people and 2 people, whatever, and they work each part-time here, where there's somebody covering this area 24/7. And to me, that makes a lot more sense than the volunteer efforts we have now, although I totally support the fire department and hope that they keep going forever. I'd love it. But in answer to what we do about people getting older here, what we need is maybe somebody who's a really terrific EMT, or a group that would come and take care of us if we needed it, that are on call. And I think it'd be very easy to do. I don't think that'd be a difficult thing. I just think it's something we should consider. Other than that idea, I don't have any really slick plans for getting old. I'm just trying to avoid it as best I can, and I'm struggling. All right.
Well, I'm really put on the spot in terms of ideas. I think that was a great idea in terms of, having professional EMTs and so on and so forth. I can see the writing on the wall also regarding the volunteer firemen, and I could imagine that it's not a volunteer one, actually, in the not too distant future. And surely that would benefit all of us, including those that are older. And I think I'd want to hear from our elders, residents, as to what specifically they have in mind, and really draw from the community, and then, flesh that out and really, have that inform a decision that the board might be able to support. I'd like to just know more what's on people's minds. It was a bit of a broad question. So. Bit of a fluffy answer.
Well, I've heard some good proposals, and I've heard some not so good proposals. In the good proposals, the elderberries had proposed making the loft and expanding into the adjacent space to have that be a meetings area and center, which I thought was terrific. It maybe doesn't fit so well with the district managers having that as their office right now. In the proposal that wasn't quite so good was perhaps Harvey's brother Jerry's proposal to have a swimming pool. Oh, there you are. Sorry, Jerry. Yeah, well, I would like it, but it could be expensive. So I think we need to hear from folks. The nice thing about this is that there's a group. There's the elderberries who is already assembled. I'll probably be joining. And I'd say propose the ideas and let's see if we can do something like that.
Well, I'm an aspiring elderberry myself. Right now, I think we have such infrastructure needs that we have to place those first to keep this community working. Those are the most important things that we deal with. Having said that, we have to deal with the needs of our community, of our residents, and do everything we can to support the community's needs. I think it's important to me personally to keep the people that have made this community the wonderful place it is here and make it a good, viable, safe place for them to live. Having said that, can we spend the community's money doing that? I think we can take little steps, like Leighton said, the converting the loft here, things like that. But we have to have, I think, a community consensus if we're going to take on bigger projects. It's a difficult situation that I think is particular to our community because it is aging. They're all aging at the same rate, but ours has
A head start.
has a head start. Yeah, well put. So I think it's something that we're going to have to deal with in the future. But I think first and foremost, with community funds, we have to deal with the infrastructure needs of the community.
Well, as the youngster on this board, I don't have as much of a conflict of interest in what I have to say. But I think we need to be flexible as to how we provide support for our aging population. I think the mean age is about 55, but to me, the people who are most in need are as they get older. And the question is, how can we sustain them in the community? How can we help them remain in the? We've had some great members of the community that have had to leave because they just couldn't find a way to stay here, either maybe financially, but it's more the logistics. How do you get? We're an isolated community. How do you get back and forth to just get basic services, to go to the doctor, to shop? If somebody gets ill, what can we provide as in a volunteer way to go to people's homes to provide them with something to have to eat? And the idea, of course, that was from the elderberries that Ann Jeske, I think, is one of the originators, was to provide a space where people can gather together, because isolation is a big issue in aging. And so these things can all come together to at least help people stay in the community longer. I have a friend who's has a dementia. Jerry knows him. I bring him out to the community here to keep his life richer. But I tried to get he tried to get a whistle stop to drive him out here. Well, we don't do Muir Beach, they said. Well, I think we could probably lobby Whistle Stop and present a case to them that we deserve their services as much as anybody else in Marin County. So I think there are things we can do if we're alert to it. Also, one thing that seniors have going for them, there's good pathways to getting funds for seniors through government agencies, and that should be looked at.
This next question, if you will indulge me, will just be for 1 minute, but I thought it was interesting. We've got $900,000 in the general fund. What's the problem? How much money do we need? And we'll start with Linda.
Well, of course, we've got money in the bank, but we have large infrastructure projects that we're facing, and there has been some deferred maintenance from being so frugal in the past. So, you know, I'm a working class Northern English girl, and I know about what, you know, getting the good life on a shoestring budget is. I've done it all my life, and it's one of my mantras, and I definitely bring those values to the board. But with large infrastructure projects, so just to give you a sense of it, you know, the road is going to be double the scale of the project financially than the large water tank was. You know, it's a lot of money. And $900,000 isn't enough. I mean, $1 million sounds like a lot, but it's not enough. So we need to be putting things in reserve and planning for the long term and fundraising for the rest, and really looking at finances over the long term and getting stuff done earlier, you know, perhaps low interest loans, whatever it might be.
I think the reason that we feel that we don't have enough money for the Sunset Way project is that Bill Hansel got a bid that was exceedingly high. When we were working on the plans with ILS Associates, they did an engineer's estimate, and it came in around $800,000. We had some other reserves that we could draw upon, and we felt like we could get that project done. Bill ended up asking for bids just on an informal basis. They said, well, this is like really busy. He said, I don't care, give us a number. And it came in something like 1.3 or 1.4 million. I don't think it's been adequately bid. I think that we could do better. I think we could proceed with this project. So I don't think we're quite as poor as we are making ourselves out to be.
What I agree with what Leighton said about the way the asking for a bid was done, and hopefully we can do much better than that. But $900,000 is a lot of money. You could almost buy a house here for that. Now, yeah. But we do have a lot of projects. We have work to do at the community center, all the things we've been talking about, and we need to reserve for future improvements. We're not in a horrible, horrible position like it's been characterized sometimes, but we do need to be very careful with our money. That's not enough to do everything we need to do and plan for the future. So it is a problem, and it's going to continue to be a problem going forward.
If we look at the financials of that $900,000, there are breakdowns on it that take away from the available monies. We need active reserves for just the functioning of the community, and there's money set aside for emergencies. So when you start taking away some of those figures, the numbers shrink. I do agree that we need to be very careful with how we manage the money. I think the current approach to studying what is needed on the road, getting careful preliminary estimates, then more firm estimates, putting it out to looking for contractors who are qualified to do the work, and then doing a competitive bidding is what's going on, and it's a much more professional approach than we had before.
I'd be the first to say that $900,000 sounds like a lot more money than it is. I don't think that anybody could buy anybody's house here for $900,000 these days, but I don't think that's an issue. I don't think we're talking about whose house can we buy for $900,000. We're talking about what the community needs, not the wish list. What's the community need? What do we need to come up with to run this community responsibly? $900,000 is a lot of money. We need more. It's not enough to pave Sunset and fix the community center, do a lot of things, but we have income every year too. We're continuing to build this fund. Like I said at one point, $33 is what we had in the bank. We got 900,000 now. I'm pretty much convinced that we can continue to build the war chest, do things when we have the money, and do them effectively. I don't think it's an impossible situation at all. I just think we need to be careful in how we do it, just the way we always have been in the past.
We'll start with Leighton. What's the importance of an audit, and do they provide adequate evaluation of the financial condition of the Muir Beach CSD?
I think one of the most important things of an audit is your first audit. The auditors end up taking a close look at your financial controls, your financial procedures, and make comments. When we went through the first 3 year of audits that I mentioned, we learned a lot from them. We ended up having a report signed by the district manager for bills to be paid before the checks were printed up. We had all the timesheets also reviewed and signed, and all sorts of procedural things. So I do think that they're very valuable. I think that auditors will tell you that they're not there to check for fraud. I think that incidentally they might run across it. I don't think we've ever had a situation where fraud was a possibility or a potential. So I don't think that that's one of the things they're useful for. As I say, I think we learned a lot from the first audit. We ended up trying to, or we incorporated that into all of our procedures in preparation for the next audit. And I hope that those things were not ever mentioned again in the upcoming audit. So I think that we probably did a good job, and the auditor agreed with us.
Well, the purpose of an audit is to make certain that all the financial standards are being adhered to, and to also propose improvements in controls and so on. And there have been a few recommendations just to make, to the process to make it work maybe more smoothly, provide some greater certainty. But audits are also required by law for special districts like our own. And we're getting caught up now. We're basically 2 years away from being totally caught up. So that's something that will be going forward. And the cost, which if you've been paying attention to the budgets and the ledgers, which has been high because we've been paying for these past years, will be going down. It basically gives the regulators, and it should give the community a sense of comfort that everything is being done properly. I don't think fraud or anything like that was ever a question. And I think the Big 8 have demonstrated that audits are no guarantee against that. So,
Well, it's hard to follow a financial manager in answering questions about audits, but they are a mechanism for looking at how we control our funds, whether we're following proper procedures that are follow a code that comes from the federal government, I believe. It is a state law that audits be conducted within 12 months of the previous fiscal year, every year, unless there are special conditions, which I don't think we have met. So we put ourselves at risk for additional oversight if we don't keep up with doing the audits as required. I agree that from what I've read of the audits, there's been no question of mishandling of funds or even improper usage of the methods to conduct our business. But the other part of the audit is, and I think that's behind the spirit of it, is that audits provide the public the opportunity to see what's going on fiscally with their government. And so we haven't had that benefit for a time now, and it's revealing to look at what we come up with. There are arguments about how funds have been you transferred from one fund to another, and I think that's good. It's good that that's coming out, and to understand better how monies are being managed, and what we can do to improve our fiscal status.
Audits are a necessary evil. Only evil in that we have to pay for them. We have perfectly good people that do our budgets in the community. They're honest. We do what we need to do to demonstrate where the money goes. And the auditor comes in and basically looks at our things and tells us primarily better ways to do it. They're not really in there looking for some fraud thing or anything like that. They're just trying to help us. But they're very, very expensive. And I think Leighton kind of glossed over the fact that when he was the general manager, he changed everything, all the policies that we were doing to streamline these audits so they won't cost so much money. There was an awful lot of work that went into just boring scanning document after document and putting them into the right places. So when the auditor came, we didn't use so much of their time, and we were able to get it done less expensively. And again, we had a terrific deal set up where somebody was going to do them all for 10 grand. But unfortunately, Bill didn't like that idea and threw the baby out with the bathwater. But nevertheless, the big deal here is audits are what we have to have. Audits are good for the public. It shows that we're doing the things in accounting that we should be doing. That's all they are. And we're going to get the rest of them done. It's just a matter of time. We've never had a problem with the auditors saying, you guys are so far behind, we're going to sue you. That's not happening. What happens, they've always been very cooperative. We've really worked well with them in the past, and we'll continue to do so in the future, but we're going to have them.
Thank you. Let's go around this way.
Yeah, so I agree with pretty much with what everybody has just said. Audits are required by law. It's illegal, actually, for us not to, for the board not to supply them on an annual basis to you, the taxpayer, so that you know what's being done with the money that you've paid, the taxes that you've paid. And they're also really great for the public to see if there's any financial issues that are coming up, so they can be caught ahead of time and can be shifted. I want to second also that there is no question at all that there was any fraudulent activity going on with the movement of $350,000 from the general fund to cover losses on the water. But that's a policy decision that the public should know about and should approve, actually. Because maybe it's not good policy to do that. Maybe we disagree with that policy. An audit is an opportunity for things to come up to the surface, for us to have a discussion as a community, for us to agree. It's government oversight. It's government for the people, by the people. It's a good thing.
I want to thank the public for coming this evening. It's amazing to see 58 people in a small community come and attend a forum and hosted by the Elderberries. This will be the last 1-minute question, unless we have more. I know. So the question reads for 1 minute, starting with Peter. Okay. What do you think the CSD has accomplished this year or has not accomplished? 1 minute, please.
I think this year the CSD has gotten, or the CSD board has gotten the CSD sort of rolling on a better track, cleaning up processes. One of the things we've accomplished that I'm proud of is having hired our 2 co-district managers. Thank you to the Personnel Committee for that. And I think we've made some, maybe slow, but progress in prioritizing the community's needs. We've made a lot of efforts towards um, I don't know, I guess prioritizing is the word I want, the different projects and identified things we need to work on. It takes a while to sort of turn even a small ship like ours and get us going down the right track, but I think we're getting there, so.
Thank you.
Well, I think the past 2 years, the Board of Directors has accomplished quite a bit considering what they've had to face over this period of time with the transition of having to hire new district managers, put together a new water management team, and deal with the budget as it had been constructed. The new budgeting process, I think, is one in which we as laymen can understand much better, and so we know and have a much better idea how our monies are being spent, and to be able to, a typical person can review the budget and see that. So, and putting personnel policies in place that will be lasting for quite a while, I would hope, that have to do with the policies of how employees are to be hired, treated, reviewed, establishing more detailed district manager and other positions. All of these have been significant contributions.
Thank you.
Could you do that question again? I'm curious. I think, wasn't it, what has the board accomplished in the last year?
Has accomplished or has not?
It has not in the last year. Oh, it's easy for me in a minute, because I don't think there's really been enough things. But I do agree that the board has done some serious, or made a serious effort to work on primarily protocol and process. And I think that there's a lot of good in that. I think they have. I think that there's been a shortage of action items that have been primarily a problem with the idea of that you can only stay till 9 o'clock and then we have to cancel the meeting or stop the meeting. And I don't think that's very effective. I think that the board has maybe would be better off prioritizing what has to get done and get those things done early, and maybe not to end up maybe not getting as many things done. But I think a lot of what the current board has done is good in the process side. I think that's been good.
Thank you. Well, of course, I have a long list of what we got done. And this is just off at the top of my head. And then there's some things more things that I'd like to get done. But first of all, I want to give a big thank you to those people in the community, 50 plus people who are working for the community, volunteering their hours. Really for us to get that going, completely different way of really getting the volunteer culture of the community involved in governance, I think is a terrific accomplishment. We've got access to Spindrift. We've had 8 years of audits done. We've got the water rate adjustment out. We actually exited a DM that wasn't functioning very well and got 2 excellent ones in. That was a huge accomplishment. We've got new budget accounting process in place. We've got 90% of the people on the Sunset Way project aligned with the way that that's moving forward. Thank you very much, Mike. That's huge.
Thank you very much.
And new water managers in place.
I am most happy with Mary Haley being hired as district manager. I'd been a proponent of hers from the very first round. I'm also super happy with Timo Blank and his wife Steph coming on as the part of the water team along with Helen from over at Green Gulch. I'd had my eye on Timo for many years. I think it's working out great. I think that we have learned a lot in this year in terms of involvement from committees and how things work and how things don't work so well. And I think that Linda's list of accomplishments is real. But I'm most happy about the personnel that we have now involved, and I think we'll go from here.
Well, we're on to our closing 1-minute statements. And I want to remind you that the League of Women Voters sponsors a nonpartisan website called votersedge.org. And as many questions as we've had today, we have those along with those that were given to me this evening that can be posted on Voters Edge website. And we invite all of the candidates to prepare a page, and we'll send you a link to do so with these questions included. So now we want to remind you that National Voter Registration Day is September the 26th, and anyone that you know who's not registered to vote, who has moved or has moved into your neighborhood, is required to fill out a new voter registration card. And you can take some. We have some on the near the door. You can take those with you or fill one out tonight. We want to remind you that the last day to register to vote is register to vote is October the 23rd, 2 weeks before the election. And we also want to remind you that here in California, we have a new legislation that's been passed, and that is same-day registration. So you can go to the Registrar of Voters office at the Civic Center, room 121, register to vote, as well as vote the same day, provisionally. So, provisionally.
No, not provisional.
Oh, pardon me.
Not provisional. You can go to after the deadline, you can go to the registrar's office, register to vote, and vote the same time.
And vote the same day.
Even on election day.
And
That's brand new.
Yeah, brand new legislation. So in our 1-minute closing statement, we'll start in reverse order, starting with Steve. And in your 1-minute statement, we'd like you to address your top 3 priorities that you feel are most important to the district in functioning better. So I'll give you pass the microphone.
That's pretty good. I wish I could condense my first statement, since I said my 3 priorities are. But I love this community. 29 years of experience on past boards. I've learned a lot. Made some hopefully non-repeatable errors, but always gave everyone a chance to be heard and always kept the finances at the highest level. When I started the Muir Beach Board, as I said earlier, with Ailey Schutz, Leva Wine, Warren Myers, and Fran Coney, we had the $33. We brought it up to almost $1 million. I got 30 seconds left. After building a state-of-the-art earthquake-resistant water tank that's probably unparalleled in any community, I hope you'll vote for responsible financial decisions and the opportunity to have everybody heard. Thank you all so much for coming.
Frank, would you like to go next?
Worried about that. Well, this is an important election in the life of Muir Beach. We are faced with projects that need doing. These projects will be costly and will stress our financial resources. Careful fiscal management is needed. Significant progress has been made by the current board the past 2 years by setting in place the tools to take on these challenges. We have a clear choice in this election. Do we want to continue with the approach of sound fiscal policy and oversight, community involvement and openness shown by the current board, or return to the management methods and style of the past? I have years of experience in government, in leadership, and working on boards and committees that successfully reached complex goals. I want to be part of a team that accomplishes the job in our community faces in an efficient, cost-effective, and timely way. I'm asking for your vote so I can contribute to this goal.
Thank you. Linda?
No, it's
Oh,
Peter.
pardon me. Peter. Reverse order.
I think one of the most important things that I want to see happen over the next year is to continue to hone our budget process. I think we made great improvements with that last year, in addition to the hiring of the district managers and the water team. And I'd like to continue to hone the prioritization process in terms of how we spend our district money and what we really focus on doing. And then, as Steve said, I think we want to make sure that the community's voice is heard on all of these issues and it's taken into consideration and part of the mix for the decisions the board makes going forward.
Aside from all the things that we think that we are, what we are primarily is a water board. I find it a little bit strange that we have a water board of 5 people and no one is certified, and neither district manager is certified. I got certified when I was district manager. Maury got certified when he was district manager. I think it would be a great addition. Chlorine affects us all. Forget your style about, or your opinions on style of board members. If we're doing something that's unhealthy for us, we want to change that. I think we have a panel of excellent, everybody's qualified, everybody would do a terrific job. I think that there's something to be said to having a balance. I think that depending on who you elect, you're going to maintain a little tension or you're going to have something just be going purely in one direction. So that's my opinion. I think that if you add Steve and me to the board, you're going to get some balance.
Hi. So the last 2 years have taught me what it's like to try and make changes and improve systems in the Muir Beach CSD, and it's not that easy. I've worked really hard together with the new board to make finances more open so that people can see what's going on, and I think there's a lot more openness in that regard. And to find ways for people with great ideas about how our community can be made better so that they can get involved with their passion and enthusiasm and talents. And I'm really happy about that. I've been very committed to getting professional standards for personnel and contracts in place. And I think we should do more of that. And all of these to ensure that the projects we face can be done more efficiently and more effectively. I think we've got work to do. I'd like to get more of that low-hanging fruit. I'd actually personally like to be moving forward much faster, but we've been getting the systems in place in order to do that. So again, we've been getting our cross-country skis on, and I'm looking forward to going forward faster now.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. We appreciate your time. You can find this video on lwv.org, and we thank the Community Media Center of Marin for videotaping this evening. And you can also find more information on votersedge.org. Have a good evening.
All right, so I think we should give a good hand to the candidates for coming tonight, first of all. And also to the League of Women Voters, volunteering for tonight. And definitely to the Elderberries for putting this on tonight. And don't forget, these candidates are your neighbors. You can still ask them lots of questions, not in this forum. So, do it.